evening, folks. You're listening to Eddie Carson here at Race Matters. You're listening to our show here at WJOP LP Newburyport, Chopper Radio 96.3. You can also find us at the Hub and on YouTube. I hope everything's good. Hey, super excited because I get a return guest in the studio today. I am here with Bethany Doruea, the Executive Director for the Museum of Old Newbury. And we're going to talk a little bit about, I think we're going to get into the funk about a couple things, but primarily, I've been wanting to talk to her about the community of Newburyport. I've been wanting to talk to her a little bit about this white guy named Caleb Cushing, whom I must profess, be transparent and honest. Bethany is really the scholar, the genius, the person who knows this person exponentially more than I do. He only came to fruition for me, 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, man, I do not want to be known as the Caleb Cushing expert. Come on.
Well, that's okay. I think it's okay. And I think it's important that we talk about him. So, one of the things I wanted to start off with you about is the fact that when people think about Newburyport, work with me here. Do people think first of William Lloyd Garrison, the abolitionist? Or do folks think of Caleb Cushing, who was quite the global traveler and political leader and all those things? Oh, and someone who also, advocated for slavery as well.
Yeah. So I will tell you from my own perspective, I certainly knew about Garrison before I knew about Caleb Cushing, but I think Caleb Cushing was very much a celebrity in his time, in a way that Garrison was not. I think the thing, the history has not been kind to Caleb Cushing. It has been much kinder to William Lloyd Garrison.
Yes, it has.
And the role, which is rightfully so, but the roles I think are flipped now from where they were during their own lifetime, when Garrison was really pretty widely considered a crazy man, a fanatic, unreasonable, undemocratic, sort of, why can't you just leave us alone? And we'll get, like, we're decent people. We'll get around to abolition when we're ready. Whereas Caleb Cushing was very celebrated as an intellectual. He was an incredibly important politician. So I think things have flipped, and I think that that's the way it should be in a lot of ways. I think, 100 years ago, everybody would have known who Caleb Cushing is, but, I am in the position, as you know,
yes,
of being the executive director of the house that is named after him. It became a National Historic Landmark because of Caleb Cushing's involvement in the house. And
help me out. And again, I learned that while I was over there earlier today, so I just want to be transparent. I don't want to present myself as something that I'm not, right? One of your
I love a man that does his research.
I don't know. One of your awesome or two of your awesome interns. I'm just going to give a shout out to Annabelle real quick. Woo. But I believe where the Museum of Old Newbury is located right now, so that used to be the house that Cushing lived. It became a National Historical Registry in 74, right?
So there's a different level. So the National Register is a great designation, but it is not a National Historic Landmark. A National Historic Landmark means that your site is of importance at a level where the entire country should know about your site, and it's of national importance.
Thanks for the correction.
It's just a different level. It's like, JV and varsity. So National Historic Landmarks are fairly rare, and there's a very intense process that you have to go through to become a National Historic Landmark.
And nothing wrong with JV. I've only played varsity. I've always been varsity.
I've never even played JV,
so but nothing wrong with JV.
There's nothing wrong with that. I couldn't even make a club team, so we're totally fine. But in the world of preservation, the National Historic Landmark is the highest designation, meaning, it's like a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It has a certain cachet.
Yeah.
So, the fact that the Cushing Museum became a National Historic Landmark on the back of the legacy of Caleb Cushing is complicated for sure, because, in a way, I think it's wonderful because there is an opportunity there to have a really open conversation about the past and about the incredible legacy of suffering that ordinary people, sometimes well-meaning people, contributed to. And I think it, in a way, I'm glad that Caleb Cushing can spark a conversation in a way that maybe if it was a, dry goods merchant who happened to do well and make a mansion for himself, it might be a more difficult way to get into that conversation. And I know, one thing I know about you and me is that we like to get into a conversation.
We do.
And it doesn't take a whole lot to get us there,
No.
but this is a pathway into an important conversation, which is, Caleb Cushing did not explicitly support the institution of slavery in that he did not directly believe himself to be owning other people. There is just enough plausible deniability there that you could look at him and say, oh, there are worse people than him. But what he is, and I'm just having a little revelation here, he is what you sort of speak to the most, which is a basically decent person. Most people would consider him sort of middle of the road, who despite that did an incredible amount of harm.
So, but wouldn't you say, though, also when we're thinking about Cushing, during his time, most people considered him a vehement supporter for the institution of slavery? And it's not to say that Newburyport wasn't complicit beyond Cushing.
Totally.
When it comes to the institution of slavery. So I want to be very, very clear on that. And again, I'm not giving him a way out of this because, we just got to be honest and tell the truth.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? And particularly in terms of others' reflection. And again, maybe I'm wrong. You're the scholar on this, not me.
No. I think that Cushing was not considered a radical. I mean, he was a middle of the road kind of. I mean, it's upsetting how palatable his positions were to a lot of people in this country and in the Northeast and in Newburyport. He was Newburyport's first mayor.
Yes.
If anybody had any issue with the fact that he was the attorney general during Dred Scott, which he was, then he would not have been Newburyport's first mayor.
And that would have been under Pierce, right? President Pierce?
I believe so, yeah.
And no, I think that's right.
Gotta go back to my timeline.
No, I think that's right. And we don't want to get into, well, I may bring Dred Scott.
I know. I mean, Dred Scott is like, it fills me with, I break into a cold sweat when I think about it. It's so terrible.
Oh, and folks, and again, just for those who don't know about Dred Scott, right? Essentially, the Supreme Court said that black people were nothing but mere property. They were slaves.
They could never be Americans.
They can never be Americans. If your slave ran away, I think that case was 57.
Yeah.
Much like your car being stolen, you can go and hunt it and track it down, and you could bring it back like it was nothing but a piece of property. So again, folks, there's your United States Supreme Court. Since I'm on my soapbox briefly, I'm just going to say, right, just a reminder too that Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896 said that Negroes were inherently inferior and needed to be separate from white folks, but supposedly treated equally. And again, just so I'm on that soapbox, right, we're going to get back to Cushing here, thinking about Dred Scott and his period as the AG. I heard someone say, and I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this. I am.
Don't let that stop you.
I know. Well, it has never stopped me before, but I'm going to say this. I was listening to a show after the right-wing male supremacist Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, and I heard someone on NPR state that this was the most devastating decision by the Supreme Court in United States history, and I literally screamed. Not to say it's brutal, all that stuff, but yet I just went back to the fact of Dred Scott, that a black man is worth your shoe.
Well, I mean, it's in the Constitution, right? 3/5 of a man.
Well, but 3/5 is not really in the Constitution.
Well, I mean, that was what they were given.
But that's how they worked it in, right?
Well, I mean, it is in the Constitution for the purposes of
voting and everything,
representation.
representation. That's fair. Yes.
Right, because Southern white men wanted to, have the benefit of the numbers of, of their enslaved people,
And yet-
without actually having to treat them like humans or believe that they were human. So the 3/5 rule was this compromise. I mean, I think the difference, let me just say,
Okay.
I think Dred Scott, which is universally sort of understood as the worst constitutional ruling in history, in my opinion, and
I agree.
in opinions of people that know a whole lot more about constitutional law than I do. But I think it was of a piece of its time. There were plenty of people at the time. I don't think it surprised a lot of people. It was horrible, but it was, slavery was an institution that was ongoing at that time. There were still plenty of people who felt that way. I think the Roe v. Wade decision was such a shock because it felt, this feels, a lot of people have said this, like, one of the great benefits of being a historian, as you know, is that I know what it actually was like to be in Germany in the 1920s and early 1930s,
30s.
where people were like, this is great. We're all at speakeasies and all the intellectuals are writing newspapers and there's anarchists everywhere and everything's great. And the jarring effect of what happened next.
The Nazis come to power, shut everything. Absolutely.
Right. And people are like, how could this happen? I don't think anybody looked at Dred Scott and said, how could this happen? Because it was happening all over the place at that time. Doesn't make it any better. It doesn't make it any better. I think it was less shocking. Roe v. Wade is coming at a time when, for an entire, more than a generation, a lifetime of people, we've had this right. It's felt like something that we can assume is going to be fixed. It's a precedent. Any legal mind that you talk to is going to tell you that is what law, constitutional law is based on, is precedent.
Well, and also we got to remember too that, and again, check me on my stats. I'm not notorious for making stuff up. I just like to pull stuff out of the top of my head quite quickly because I'm good at it. But I want to say roughly well over, I will take the well over out, but 70+% of Americans support Roe v. Wade. So you have a Supreme Court.
Right.
So going back to your point, which I like, we go back to Dred Scott. There are a lot of folks who still.
Yeah. Do you think 70% of America at the time of Dred Scott believed that black men could be full citizens in America?
Absolutely not.
So
and I agree with you. That's
shocking.
the thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Still, just devastating.
Which is sad. Which is incredibly sad, actually. It should have been more shocking that you can take a fully realized human life and say, this life, does not qualify to be a citizen of this country. It's sad that it wasn't more shocking, but it wasn't. It's still a terrible decision, and it still connects back to Caleb Cushing, who was very much in favor. History does not treat him well. I think it's a little bit scary that in the 1970s it was still, you could paint a picture of him that was so glorious that a house that was not even the house that he lived in for most of his adult life became a National Historic Landmark.
Yep. And so in my understanding, again, not to plagiarize, but some of this information I learned recently from your wonderful interns and colleagues, that the Cushing family moved into the current house where the Museum of Old Newbury is housed right now. Was it like 1816?
So 1818.
1818.
So
okay.
the house was built in 1808 by the Hunt family. So William Hunt, who was a sea captain, built the house, and then went to sea, as sea captains do, and died in 1811 at sea. So his widow, it's actually an incredibly tragic but very rich story. His widow appears to have left the house entirely and rented both. She sold one half of it to Caleb Cushing's father, John Newmarch Cushing, and she rented the other half to someone. She's just like, she's trying to get by, right? Mm-hmm. She just has this brand new mansion. Imagine this. And then because women were at a significant economic disadvantage, of course. So then she's trying to, make sure she can take care of her family. So she sells half of it to John Newmarch Cushing. He then buys the other half of it in 1822. So other than that first 10 years, the house was owned by the Cushing family until 1955. So a significant, in everybody's memory and their parents and their grandparents' memory, this is the Cushing house, right?
Which is not true.
It was not built by the Cushing
Absolutely.
family. No, but it was lived in for the vast majority of its life by the Cushing family. So I can see that. But, Caleb Cushing, was in Washington for significant chunks of his adult life.
Or overseas.
He was an
Yes.
ambassador. He was, working on trade agreements with Spain, with China, with Colombia for the Panama Canal. He is widely recognized as, one of the contributors to the diplomatic process that led to us being able to build the Panama Canal. I mean, he's, I can see why in the 1970s there was enough there to say, this is a really important guy. This house in which he lived off and on through his life, should be an important national story. I mean, an important landmark, an important building at the highest national level.
But so I'm going to ask you a difficult question. And folks, if you're joining us, this is Race Matters. I'm Eddie Carson, and I am here with Bethany Doruea, the executive director at the Museum of Old Newbury. You're here listening to WJLP-LP Newburyport, 96.3 FM. So I got to ask you this question.
Please.
Is he really that important?
Honestly? It totally depends.
No. I just want you to answer the question. Is he really? No, depends. There's no sitting on the fence. I mean, you get a choice. You get a choice, right? Is he significant enough? And obviously, he must be something because we're having a whole conversation about him, right? And we'll continue to do that. But what would you say?
In American history.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Absolutely.
Yes. He did the first free trade agreement with China, which was a huge deal.
That was
1844 to 1846. So he opened up trade with China.
And wasn't he participated also in the Mexican-American War around that time?
He did, although the more you look into that, the less attractive he looks in that process. He tried to raise a regiment in Massachusetts to go fight the Mexican-American War, and he was not particularly popular at the time, and he did not get the bill passed to raise money, and he sort of had a fit and said, well, I'll just pay for it myself. And then he paid for part of it, and they couldn't get the rest of the money out of him, and it ended up being a bit of a shambles. He showed up in Mexico City in great triumph after there was no opposition.
So essentially, he was there to get his picture taken.
Essentially, he was there to buy art, because some of the art in the Cushing house is from.
And I think I may have seen some of that
from the Mexican campaign. It's not his most glorious moment, but again, I think that you say I'm not on the fence about Caleb Cushing. I know exactly who he is, and I myself have some words for him. Like I think that he had the opportunity at many different junctures to make different decisions, and he failed to. And there were plenty of people who were in his same, whatever sort of bucket we want to put these people in. They're privileged. They're from a merchant class. They're from a port city. There were plenty of people who had all those same ingredients, but made different choices. He had choices, and he made the wrong ones over and over and over again. But in terms of like the whole sweep of American history, is he important? Yes. I mean, is Jefferson Davis important to understanding history? Yes. Does it mean I want to go get a drink with him? No.
You're not allowed to.
No. And let me tell you something. Jefferson Davis enters in prominently into this conversation about Caleb Cushing.
So let's talk about that for a little bit, because I think you've come across letters and done some work between a relationship between Caleb Cushing, the son of Newburyport and its first mayor.
Oh, yeah.
And Jefferson Davis. And again, for folks, if you don't know who Jefferson Davis is, or was, I should say, he was the president of the Confederacy of the United States. I have the liberty of being born and growing up in my hood, Montgomery, Alabama, where one of our major public high schools is named Jefferson Davis. I have another show on this because I get upset at black folks who walk around with JD on there because they like football. Or we could talk about the other major school there, Sidney Lanier. Or how about this one? Jefferson Davis rival school in the city, Robert E.
No, stop it.
Lee.
No, really?
And they keep saying they're ready to change the names and stuff. I used to get upset all the time about black folks not holding their kids out of school, saying we're not sending them to some white supremacist place. And after the murder, the execution by that killer cop of George Floyd, I was excited to see folks went doing a tore the statue down, but it's still Robert E. Lee. And then I see you on the news and social media, folks who parade with their Robert E. Lee. I even saw recently someone had, for their class reunion, Lee family. And I bit my tongue. And it's interesting because I get in a lot of trouble back home, especially when I go home. I'm organizing and folks say, you know what? You left the deep South and you're hiding up there with those white New England liberals and you're talking about us. Why don't you come back down here and keep saying that stuff? I can't tell you the criticism I get, but again, I'm rambling here, all of that stuff.
But you do. You have integrity. You do go down south and you do say the same thing. So I'm not sure that holds water. So I'll defend your honor.
Why?
In that case.
You know what? I appreciate that. And
I can't
that's
imagine
part
you
of it.
shrinking from a conversation about this anywhere.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Oh, never.
Well, there you go.
Hey,
so you're not talking one talk in Montgomery and another one in.
And I wouldn't do that. And people who would come after me, I say, you know what? Good luck. You better be prepared because I'm not convinced this is something that you're going to win with me.
Right.
But yet my ego and my integrity says I just don't think that's going to happen.
Well, I just feel like, and again, I thought it was so interesting watching that conversation that you had with your mom, who has this sort of like, we all get along, it's all cool. And I understand there's a whole lot more to that story. And I have those conversations with my parents as well in a different way. My parents, my mother, I asked her about something about the Vietnam War and she was like, oh, it was fine. It wasn't like it's so hard to say to somebody that was there, that has been there, but has a narrative about it. I'm not saying this anything about your mother.
No,
or my mother,
you're right. No,
but there's like, you're like, how could you be okay with that? But then if you think about all the things that we all become okay with because we get used to them and we as humans can't fight every single battle that comes across. And this is, again, there's so many hills to die on. Are you driving a gasoline powered car? Are you eating animal products? Are you utilizing only fair trade products? Like there are ethical issues that we encounter every day and most of us fail in some way.
It's easy to do. I'm a flawed human being. Intellectually, I'm flawed in the sense that most of what I do lives in archives and in books and the things that I do. That doesn't take away from the street work that I do, right?
Totally.
As being out there, being organized and organizing folks, I'm not going to apologize for that stuff. But, even that conversation you mentioned with my mom, my mom, she's been critical of me at times. She's like, you know what? Come on, Eddie. Yeah, to your point, you weren't there, right? You talk a lot.
Right.
You weren't there. It's easy for you to talk about all this radical stuff and everything. And I always tell her, I wish I could have been born back through that time. She's like, nope, you just be lynched. Or you'll be too scared. Or I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to say this. I'm not going to run from it. A person that I've been somewhat critical of, and I'm trying to take a step back. So we're celebrating Jackie Robinson. And, his beautiful wife, Rachel, 100 years old, and they're creating these things to the great Jackie Robinson. I used to be critical because sometimes I thought he caved and did this stuff. And then I sit there and I watch these documentaries and I read these books and, I can't even compare to the stuff that he went through. And thinking about the white supremacy of this country and the things that people did to him, right? And so for me, that's just ego. That's me needing probably just to sit down.
Yeah, but this is the most fundamental issue to any activist community of any kind. Do you work within the system or do you overthrow the system?
But it's funny you say that, though. But I traveled to D.C. back in, I think it was April or May, to give a lecture, and I was talking about a book chapter and Du Bois and communism and all this stuff. And someone asked me some question. I don't remember the question, but I remember my response, which was this. But even today as activists, right, and wanted to transform society, wanted to talk about people like Cushing, wanted to do this, do that. Even me, I'm complicit to a point where I pause, especially if it means my job's in trouble and I don't pay my rent. I could be the most radical activist on the planet. I can revolutionize as long as I'm employed, as long as I have the money and the wealth to do it. But as long as there's someone who signs my paycheck and, let me tell you, people watch me closely. I'm there. So I don't know.
I'm right with you. I feel, how brave am I is my question. And I am not the bravest. I am not a William Lloyd Garrison. I'm not willing to say, go ahead, throw me in jail. I'm going to lose my children, or I'm not going to have children because I can't subject them to my lifestyle. I am not the bravest. And I'm not proud of that. I just feel like in some ways, you do what you can with what you have where you are. There are some people who are willing to be extremely radical because they've got all this privilege that backs that up.
Right.
And, it's much harder. It's much harder. And it's much more impressive when you see the people that have done that have made those incredible sacrifices. And really, you need people that are really radical, that are really on the edge to show you the boundaries of what's possible. But I think we need to be honest and say that most people are not going to be. I mean, you're not radical if everyone's with you. Most people are somewhere in the middle. And one of the things that I think has happened in our, sort of little one-line optics kind of media world is that we have made you have to be the most radical in order to be heard. I'm in the middle somewhere. I run a farm animal sanctuary. My time and treasure goes to animals, and I really struggle to live my ethics around that behavior. I really struggle. I want to be comfortable. I was raised poor. I don't have a whole lot of resources to, say whatever I want and take whatever risks I want. Like you, we have to live in reality.
And you're right. I've crossed my fingers for the fact that, and I'll tell you this, surprisingly and shocking, I've never been arrested. That shocks folks. That shocks me. I mean, I showed up down in Revere with a baseball bat to ICE.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, it's bold.
I'm policing outside, and in this area in Portsmouth, as white supremacist groups have been showing up. And I have no problem with confrontation. The criticisms I get, particularly from family folk, is, I'm not that whole flight and flight or fight person. My initial reaction to everything is just a fight, and I can't even comprehend anything else. Right? Something pops up, and I'm looking. Oh, we got to get in there. We got to take care of this.
But what if that had happened when you were young, let's say, and you got absolutely brutalized?
Changed everything.
Would things be different for you?
Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the things that an older generation of activists might say, easy for you. You've never been arrested. You've never been beaten within an inch of your life. And so it's easier for you to say, why aren't you more radical?
And I think that's my point, even thinking about, Jackie Robinson, think about a lot of folks who've done some stuff. So, and those things are realities that are there. But even for us, right? And I want to pull this back to Cushing here, is for you, what kind of pressure would you get if you were to publish a book or go on a lecture tour, really promote the absolute condemnation of Caleb Cushing, especially in your position, where your office is housed, the status that you're at, and you're not a small fish here, a very public, visible person who depends on funding, fundraising, all the things you have to do. And that would be radical.
So what I would say, this is not probably, this is not the answer of which I am most proud. I mean, I would love to be able to say I wouldn't care. I would tell the truth, and
we know that wouldn't be true.
I will tell the truth. I will tell the truth.
No, I know that for a fact.
But the fact is, and this is the truth, that I don't. If I tell the truth about Caleb Cushing, just as if I tell the truth about Du Bois, or I tell the truth about any number of other people who are flawed humans, I think Caleb Cushing is more flawed, and he's not only flawed, he also made intentional decisions that put him further down that track. But I would be unable to write a book or go on a lecture tour that was only about condemning everything he did and everything he was, because that's not the totality of any human life. Any human life. You know, even an excellent biographer of the worst person in the world that you could possibly imagine in order to present a human is going to have to tell a nuanced story.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
So what I hope, and what I'm constantly surprised when I don't encounter this, is that I don't see anything but benefit to shining light on everything. And I do this in my own family, and it is, you know, I come from a family of closed-lipped old New Englanders. We don't talk about anything. Like, we don't talk about any family business.
No politics, no religion at the dinner table.
Yeah,
none
well,
of that.
definitely not any sort of family stuff. Nobody ever, you know, got pregnant before the wedding night, and nobody ever did anything. Nobody ever got arrested. Like, no addiction. We don't talk about those things. And for whatever reason, I feel like the only way to escape these prisons, you know, let me back up a little bit. This is sort of personal information, but my mother was raised in this old New England family. She's very quiet, very, very smart, but a little bit sort of shy. But she found that secrecy and that cloistered environment so unbearably restrictive that all she wanted to do was escape from it. And so when I came back into it, I came back into the family, my mother's family, this whole New England family, and I just blew it up. I just didn't want to see it. I wanted to ask all the questions. I wanted to know why certain people weren't talking to other people. Like, to me, I didn't have it. I was so interested in everybody's experience, and it's not from a place of like wanting to be a gossip or wanting to spread, you know, filthy rumors or anything like that. I just, you know, I hear things about people, and it makes me love them more in a lot of ways. The ways that people screw up, or the ways that people hurt each other.
Oh, then you're going to love me for a long time. Okay, that's good. I feel much better now.
No,
I'm in good
shape. You know what I mean?
No, I know exactly
like,
what you're
I am
talking
such
about.
a flawed, damaged human. I am. And I think it has made everything so... It's made me so much more open to the experience of other people in the world. And I'm not saying that I have any sort of handle on anybody else's experience but my own, but I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of my own failings.
I mean, you know, as a historian, and one of the things that, you know, the biographies of other folks, right? And you mentioned that earlier, it allows us to examine that in some ways too. And, you know, I'll be the first to admit that I think I'm absolutely more perfect than a lot of other folks, especially the ones that are on my condemn and evil list.
Yeah.
That's there. I mean, that's just my, you know, 21st century thinking and everything too.
But, you know, again, there are a lot of people who can hide behind this very superficial world we live in, where everything is judged by your one line quote about something, and when confronted by an actual other human being, can't support that. And, you know, people, I know we disagree on this. I still believe people have the capacity to change and grow, and we have the ability to become better.
We agree slightly on that, just slightly.
You're always saying you're a pessimist and I'm an optimist. I don't know.
But I mean, and again, my contention is I'm not optimistic. I'm hopeful, and part of that hopeful, right, may fall into that. But I think, you know, I'm hopeful, but I think there are human beings and folks that can't change. I think capitalism has conditioned them in a way that they seek things that manifest and benefit only themselves, and they're willing to do what it takes. You know, we can call that the capitalist class. We can call that whatever we want to call it, some sense of hedonism, whatever. But I do think there's some actuality to that. And I know that's a dark, troubling thought that some people would say, and really, for someone like me who's an educator and do the things that I do, probably surprising. It's just where I am. The way I see the world right now, I have no other place to go.
I totally understand why you feel that way, and I think you're totally justified in feeling that way. And I think there are a lot of people, but, you know, let me just give you a weird example. So my husband and I, James, our friend,
I've heard of him once or twice.
You're connected with him a bit. So we've been watching this show called Mind Over Murder, and it's about these six. Well, let me tell you, it is actually incredibly sad. It's about these six people who were living sort of on the edge. They were sort of involved in petty crime. They were homeless. They were, had some addiction issues, some, sort of mental health issues. So they all confessed to a murder as a group. And none of them had done it. The DNA exonerated them, but they had all confessed. And of course, they had been confessed because they had confessed because they'd been coerced, they'd been threatened, they'd been, they had psychologists working for the police department that were telling them that if they had a dream about a dead body, they were remembering something. And it was this very complicated case. And it was and there was this sort of, which I thought was totally hokey. There was this hokey element where the documentary filmmaker was setting up this local theater to act out the interrogation sessions, because this community was totally divided between, these people got taken advantage of and they're innocent, and I don't care if there was no DNA there. I don't care. They were there. They're guilty. They confessed. Like, there's no logic. They confessed. They're guilty. They're bad people. They should be in jail, right? So the filmmakers and this local community theater were trying to sort of figure out how to bring these two positions together, because this town was in total turmoil about it had been torn apart by this case, right? So they acted out. They took members of the community and they acted out parts from the verbatim transcript from these interrogations in front of, and the family of the murder victim who believed these people were guilty came in. The police officer who, interrogated some of them were there. I mean, it was a really, and again, I'm like, what's theater going to do for this thing? And what happened is people changed their minds. These people who had spent the entire documentary saying, I don't care, you can show me DNA all day long. They were there somewhere. Maybe they didn't bleed on my grandmother, but they were there. Like, ignoring all the evidence. When they saw it, there's some Christian principle, and one of the reasons that we're friends is that we both have this little sort of Christian pathway in our head that we can't get away from. But this idea that there is this, this is going to be terrible, but there's a sort of a third party that can take the blame for something that you do. Mm-hmm. And that person can be the scapegoat, literally the scapegoat, the person that takes the blame for something that you've done. And what happened in this situation is that these theater performers, these actors, became this conduit for change where these people couldn't hear each other, but they heard this third person who had no personal investment in it except they were members of the community who were just trying to tell the truth. And they were able to look at that and say, I might have actually gotten that wrong. I can't even tell you, I was crying. It was transformative. It was a little local theater production company that changed an entire community. They brought this hateful, about a murder of an elderly woman, and they changed it. And I can't believe how transformative that was. And I can't believe how much I felt like maybe in some small way we can do that. Like, maybe in some small way we can look at people who are going to say, not all men, or, well, I'm not a racist, or, and that's just their position. And you can show them all the evidence to the contrary, that there are decisions they're making every day that support these systems of oppression. We can say, let me show you another thing. I'm not filled with hate. I'm not filled with rage. I just want to show you a true thing. And maybe it can happen like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm a total.
No, I mean, that's interesting.
Starry-eyed optimist.
I mean, and I like it, and you're definitely a starry-eyed optimist. But I mean, which is fair, and you give a really great point in the positioning there too. I mean, I think especially when you present folks, well, here's the evidence. Just take a look, and what does that do? But
this does not hurt me to tell you that Caleb Cushing got it wrong. It doesn't hurt me to say, even though I'm running his house museum, I want you to understand. I want you to understand that not only was he absolutely a racist, he was also a traitor. I mean, I just said that on the radio.
So help me out. So you say traitor?
Yeah, I mean, he had this ego that allowed him to believe that his personal friendship with Jefferson Davis, getting back to that whole scenario, so the Confederacy is established. Jefferson Davis is the, erstwhile president of the Confederacy. Abraham Lincoln has forbidden anyone in public life in the Union to have direct unauthorized contact with anyone in the Confederacy, right? As you would for a rebel government, right? Caleb Cushing writes a letter to his old friend Jeff Davis, and, basically, in his mind, I'm sure it was an innocuous letter. He wrote a letter and he said, here's a member of my staff, and I think he probably wants to fight on your side. So hook him up with a good position. He's a nice kid.
Wow.
He wrote a letter for his advisor, is basically the your version of
right.
that.
Yes.
Dear Jefferson,
Davis,
dear
here's
Jeff.
my letter of recommendation. Will you please employ this person?
Yeah, dear Jeffy, here's, whatever.
Yes.
He's from Charleston, and he'd really like a cushy job as a member of your staff if you could come up with that. And then he says something at the end like, isn't this all a shame? And sends it to Jefferson Davis. Now, they actually had a personal relationship. They had been in the cabinet, together.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jeff Davis was the Secretary of War maybe at some point when he was the Attorney General. I don't know. They knew each other personally. But that was treason. Sorry, your president has said you can't talk to any of these people. And he's like, I don't know. I'm an exception. I can still write this letter. And it became important because he was nominated to the Supreme Court.
Right, which, of course, that did not work out at all.
No, because the New York Times
got a
published
whole
the letter on the front
and everything.
page.
Absolutely.
And it says,
kill that.
Doom of Caleb Cushing. I mean, it's
was that the title?
Doom of Caleb Cushing.
Yeah.
Treasonous letter exposed or whatever. It was like everybody went bananas. Now, this is many, many years later. Well, it's not many years later, but it's, over a decade later. And Ulysses S. Grant was the one that nominated him to be on the Supreme Court. Ulysses S. Grant, the Union general that everybody had a great deal of respect for.
Oh, yeah. We know how perfect and what a great president and not
right.
corrupt Ulysses.
Yeah.
We won't go down that road.
Of course. But I'm just saying, people are complicated. So,
yes.
So basically his nomination was withdrawn very quickly. But, I look at that and I say, do I understand why you would write a letter like that? Like right now, if we went to war with Russia, let's say we went to war with Russia, you had a Russian kid working with you in your office that you really liked. You were forbidden to have contact with Russia, right? But this kid is going back to Russia. He's going to be posted somewhere. You're looking out for him. You write a letter that says, can you please take care of, Yuri? Give him a good position.
No,
that's
your
fair.
Friend, yeah,
right?
No, that's fair. Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at stuff.
It seems innocuous, but it is in fact treason.
Yeah. I don't write that letter.
I don't know. I might write that letter. I might feel like and I'm not.
Yuri's just going to have to stick around and stay with me.
Excusing it.
No. I know. I understand that.
I'm just saying, like, you shine light on the whole thing. I think the thing that makes people most uncomfortable in the world is not having an absolute.
That's a great point.
I mean,
that's a really good point.
It's really hard because I'm not afraid to say he committed treason. I'm also not afraid to say I kind of understand how that might have worked out in his brain, that was an okay thing to do.
No, you just gave a great example with Yuri.
There you go. I don't even know Yuri, but he's good.
Yeah, right.
But you want to make sure he's okay.
I'm going to
absolutely. You have students that are, from other countries that might be involved in some political whatever, that's not in line with American political interests. Do you take care of the person? Do you take care of the politics? I don't know. It's complicated.
Yeah. So for me, I have a complicated relationship with the United States.
Okay. So it's a different scenario. So you're going with Yuri to fight for Russia.
Possibly. I had a complicated relationship there and everything. So we're getting to the end.
It's too bad we never have anything to talk about.
We go on and on and on. Let me ask you this. For those who are listening, who will watch this on SoundCloud, on YouTube, how would you invite them into the Cushing home? It's where your office. How do you invite folks in? And again, I got to say this. I won't mention names or anything here. I am still recovering from something I heard while I was over at the museum today. And so I'm over there at Annabelle's desk, and she brings something down. She says, I want to show you something.
Oh, man.
Exactly. So a student of a colleague of mine, comes across a Bible that was wrapped in plastic. I think it was with John Pike, and it was there was a letter written in there. I read some of that. I mean, this
it's biblical.
Yes. Well, I mean, this is.
I mean, literally biblical.
Yeah, you're right. I got Moses on my mind and everything too. And so this Bible, I think, was created in 1861, and I think most of the things that were taking place, the notes and all of that in this Bible, happened around 77. And he discovers this floating in the Merrimack River.
Yep.
I get goosebumps. I've been thinking about this since I heard that earlier today.
It feels like it does feel biblical. I can't even explain that. So, like you said, somebody came across a governor's teacher's son, actually.
Yes.
Came across this plastic wrapped Bible floating down the Merrimack River, and then brought it to us. So this, what I would say, the short answer to your question is, what I would say is, come to the Cushing House, and I will tell you what we have, for good or ill. I will share what we know of the community and the memory of the community with you. Yeah. And some of it is unspeakably beautiful, and just the art and the memory and the things that people have done for each other because they love each other. Works of memorial to people that they loved that died. There's some real, genuine human power in, people keep artifacts for a reason because they mean something to people. And when they give you that artifact with the story, they give you that love. They give you that sorrow. They give you the grief. There's a human, almost like a museum in a lot of ways is almost like a living thing. It has feelings. It transfers feelings. I don't know how. I'm going to lose all my professional credibility, but it's true.
No, I don't think you are. I mean, again, I'm still moved by the fact that I didn't realize, as I've learned, that and you are now in possession of this, starting with Cushing, that one of his cigars has been passed down to every single mayor until. When did y'all get a hold of that cigar?
Very recently. Yeah. So the last mayor decided that it was too fragile to be...
Donna Holiday?
Yep, Donna Holiday decided that it should be in a museum, and she was absolutely right.
It looked great. I'm sitting and I'm looking at you.
I think it's the only cigar he never smoked.
And I'm a caretaker of cigars with my humidors, and I look and I critique, and I was sitting there just staring at it. It's like, wow, this is...
Yeah, it was given to him by the King of Spain.
Yes, that's right.
But again, going back to the Bible, right? So the Bible comes into the office, and we do all the research to figure out who owned it, what the letters say. So Annabelle, who, bless her, she's in the right field because she just goes right down into a deep dive. Who are all these people? How did they know each other? Who are the names in the Bible? And you recreate this whole little world where this, minister is giving this, young woman that he knows a gift on her wedding, and then we see what happens with her husband. There's this whole story that unfolds. But let me give you another. I know you saw some other things while you were there today, and this is a challenging topic. But we have these letters that came from Kentucky.
I saw that, and I saw some of them really talking and endorsing the institution of slavery.
Oh, not even endorsing it, but actively buying and selling human lives. So for me, I wrote a little bit about it because it was a really sort of complicated experience for me to have these letters. Those sorts of documents don't often come into my hands. So there are 3 letters. So there was a gentleman who came. He had bought a bunch of letters, and he had some letters in the collection that were from Newburyport. Important Revolutionary War era kind of letters, like bills of sale and things like that that are very interesting and important to us. So he brought those in, and then he was leaving. And as he was leaving, he sort of turned and said, let me ask you something. And I'm like, okay, all right, what's going on here? And he said, I have these letters, and you could see just in the way he was holding them that they felt heavy to him. Yeah. And, he gave us the letters. He signed them, the whole collection over, and then he left. And then we sat together, me and these letters, and they are crushing. They are crushing. They are the record of a woman and her children who are being rented out in exchange for clothing that they don't even own. You know, it's if you follow any of these, and then there's another will that distributes property in human form. The exciting thing about them is that these people are named. We know where they were. We know who they were associated with. So if people are looking at their family history, they're incredibly important documents for researchers. And I can both be really excited that we have this, you know, we found this thing that is going to help people, and really sort of crushed and angry and sad about what they say and what they reveal to us about who we are and who we were not so long ago. And, you know, but the story about that, you know, again, like, what do we do at the Cushing house? Well, we don't sit around and tell you how awesome Caleb Cushing was 24 hours a day. What we do is we take burdens. This is so biblical.
No, I'm listening. You got my attention.
You lay your burden down.
Yes.
Like, people come to the Museum of Old Newbury and they lay their burden down. Because for a lot of people, memory is a burden or it's a responsibility, and they need to lay it down, either because they're moving on, they don't have anybody to give it to, they feel burdened by being responsible for the past. And it's so not about, like, look at this awesome piece of furniture. In some cases it is, but, you know, I mean, this man walked out the door with tears in his eyes because he had been able to lay his burden down. He didn't know what to do. People had told him to burn these letters.
Oh, wow.
Because they felt ugly. They are ugly.
Oh, he would have regretted that.
Well, I would have regretted it. Maybe he wouldn't have. I don't know. But you know, I think he felt like, okay, like, I've laid it down. And what I've been able to do, what we have been able to do, Kristen Fehlhaber, the assistant director, has been incredibly instrumental in this, but we've worked with genealogists who work primarily in the Black community, who know, because my question always is, if somebody's looking for that information, where are they going to go? Right? It's a Kentucky estate.
Yes.
Right? So if you're the descendant of enslaved people in Kentucky, where are you going to look for that information? And who's doing the best job of preserving, digitizing, sharing this information? And we found those people, and we will digitize this record and we will share it with everybody we can. And part of the terms of the gift to its permanent home are going to be that it's going to be shared digitally across platforms. But it's going to go to a place where the people that are looking for this material are going to be able to find it. It's not for us. But we could help him lay that burden down. And that feels pretty good.
I love the work that you're doing over there. It's super powerful. I get fired up listening to you, visiting, really learning things that, you know, I must confess that I just didn't know. Right? I'm someone who's well-read, who believes I know a whole lot of stuff. And then I discover from folks that, no, let me tell you about these amazing things that are working, things you don't know.
Well, I mean, that's part of the sign of, you know, your joie de vivre. You're ready to learn more. You know that there's more to learn. And I hope you always feel that way. I hope I always feel that way.
No, you're great. I got to read your book. That'll help too. So
I got to write a new one.
We got to do one. You know, so folks, thank you for listening to Race Matters here at WJLP LP Newburyport here at Joppa Radio 96.3. I'm Eddie Carson. This is Race Matters. You are listening to the brilliant Bethany Groff, the executive director of the Museum of Old Newbury. And when you get a chance, and you've heard some exciting stuff as we've delved into Caleb Cushing, and, you know, some ramblings here and there, that happens in our conversations, all organic, not scripted or anything like that. That's what you get. So be well, make wise decisions, and always vote well.
And listen to some good music.
And, oh, absolutely.
Thanks, Eddie.
You got it, my friend.